Today I'm making a stuffy on a knitting loom. Some assembly required. So, this is going to be another experiment. In my unending quest to find more uses for knitting looms, I'm going to try to make a stuffy. I mean, it's basically just a stuffed hat, right? It sounds foolproof. Let's find out. Here's what I'll be using. My smallest round knitting loom, the scoopy tool that comes with it, a yarn needle, scissors, worsted weight yarn, and a spool knitter. This next part is basically how to use a knitting loom if you are unfamiliar with this fabulous tool. If you're familiar, this will just be a review. So, I'll start by making a slip knot and putting it over the first loop of my loom. If you don't have a loom with an obvious starting point, just pick a peg and mark it with an elastic or something. Now I'll tighten up my knot a little bit, but not too much. Next, I'll wrap the yarn around each peg clockwise as I go around the loom counterclockwise. Now just keep going all the way around until you get back where you started. Then I push those loops down so I have more room, and I go around again, just exactly the same way. When you get back to the start this time, you should have 2 loops on each peg. I like to wrap my extra yarn around this sticky outy peg, but you can also just hang on to it. I think it is easiest to start on the last peg rather than the first one, so you don't have to worry about everything unraveling. Use your tool to scoop the bottom loop over the top one and let it pop off the peg. That's it. Do the same thing all the way around the loom. When you reach the end again, all your pegs should now have 1 loop. So that's really the whole loom knitting process. Make the loops, then scoop them over for as many rows as you need until it's the size you want. Here we are. This seems like a reasonable size. It's about 6 inches long. Of course, you can choose to make it longer or shorter. The problem that I find with this particular kind of knitting loom is that it leaves these big holes in between all your stitches if you don't use ridiculously thick yarn. But we will deal with that later. First, we'll take our little tube off the loom in a way that makes it easy to close it up. I'm going to make sure I have enough yarn by measuring it all the way around the loom, plus a little bit extra. Then you can thread that onto your yarn needle. Of course, I'm making it a little harder on myself by using a little needle, so I'm using a piece of thread to help it through. Now I'll take my needle and pull my extra thread through each loop, and then pull them off the peg one by one, all the way around the loom. When you've made it all the way around and taken the last loop off the last peg, you are ready to pull it tight. So, you just pull your yarn to cinch up the hole. And then sew through a few of the loops and tie some knots so that the whole thing is secure. I am not too worried about how it looks because I'm planning to turn it inside out. But even so, it's not too messy the way it is. There we go. Either side can be out, but I'm picking the purl side for this particular guy. And now we're back to the problem of these holes doing a very poor job of hiding any stuffing. I've decided to give it 2 layers of skin. Efficient? No. Effective? Yes. See? When you put the second layer over, the stuffing almost completely disappears. Alright, I'm about to close this one up the same way I closed the stuffed one, so don't worry, you didn't miss anything. I will just find the tail and tie it to the end of my yarn here. Now, I'll just sew through each of these loops around the remaining edge. I'll go in one loop and then out the next, all the way around. When I've gone through all the loops, I will tuck in any extra yarn bits and cinch it up tight. And I'll just secure it with my usual knots and hide the yarn end inside.
It's so squishy!
Of course, I'm going to have to make skinny little arms and legs on the spool knitter. So here's a review of that process. First, you pull some yarn through the hole. I like to use a crochet hook. Then, very similar to the knitting loom, you wrap the yarn around each peg around the circle. For each subsequent row, you can just wrap the yarn around the whole circle, like this. Now, you go around the circle, pulling the lower loops up and over and off the pegs. And that's a row. You do each row the same way, occasionally pulling on the yarn tail to encourage the cord to go down into the tube. When you've reached the desired length, you can cast off by pulling a loop off its peg and moving that to the peg on the right. Sometimes it's not pretty. Pull the new bottom loop off and move the remaining loop again to the right. Keep going until you have only one loop left, and then pull your yarn, your leftover yarn, through that loop and pull the yarn to tighten. So you can't see how long your cords are until they're longer than the spool, because otherwise they're inside. So I had to count the rows to make sure the arms and the legs were the same length. I made the arms 10 rows long and the legs 20, if you were curious. Now before I sew the arms on, I'm going to pull the shorter piece of leftover yarn into the inside with a crochet hook. You could also use a yarn needle. Then you cut off whatever's sticking out, and I will just do that to the rest. Ha ha, cute! The plan is to just find a place where the arms and legs make sense, and then sew them on securely. So far so good. It might not be the most perfect sewing, but I think that's okay. He's not the most perfect guy. And now for his arms. Ta-da! Now, there are a lot of different ways that you could add eyes to this guy. Googly eyes or craft felt glued on could be cool, but I'm gonna try these needle felted eyes because I think they fit his personality. I'll just sew them on with some embroidery floss. I don't mind that these look a little bit hand sewn, but if you wanted something a little more refined, you could sew all the details on before you close the guy up. That way you could reach into the inside and tie your knots and all that stuff. It could be a little bit neater if you were going for that sort of thing. However, I think he is delightful just the way he is. You could add a bunch of other details like hair or like pom-pom ears, bunch of legs, really anything. But I think that this shape is a pretty good place to start, and then you can go anywhere you want with it. And he's so squishy. So I think that this is really cool. I have a plan to address the issue with the too much space in between the stitches. I was thinking that I could probably scale this down on the 3D printer and make a smaller thing where the stitches would be closer together, and then you could just shove some stuffing in it. You wouldn't have to double coat it. I will work on that for a future video. But until then, I will squish a lot. And there's another reason why I think these kinds of eyes are a little bit more fun than something glued on, because they're totally squishy. So, it's not a terribly hard project. It takes a little bit of time, so if you're looking to fill some time, this is good because you do have a fair amount of knitting to do. But it's really easy knitting. So, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you like this kind of video and you are not subscribed yet, you can subscribe right underneath the video and click that all notification bell so you don't miss anything. I cover a wide range of crafty topics on this channel, and you wouldn't want to miss anything. Oh, look, he's sitting. New videos come out on Tuesdays and Saturdays, so stay tuned. And until the next video, be awesome, and I'll see you then. Bye! Bye! I like how his little legs move. He's dancing.